So I want to welcome back Dr. Cris Azzola, who is joining us for a second podcast. And hopefully there will be more. Today's podcast, she is going to be talking to us, following on the last one a little bit, on the changes that we and our bodies go through as we're aging. And today she wanted to talk about the nutrients and how a lot of the nutrient requirements change, and in particular for protein. So I will not go into it. I will let her explain. And welcome again, Cris, to the Healthy Tips After 50 podcast.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you for having me. I wanted to talk about protein today. It's one of the major things that we need to be aware of and help ourselves with as we age. We definitely start to lose some muscle mass and lean protein in our bodies as a part of the normal natural aging process. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions around what constitutes filling in that nutrient need, and misconceptions I wanted to go through. And, while our lean body mass is naturally declining, we actually lose about 2 to 3% of our lean body mass per decade. But after 50, or as we age, I'm sure there's some variability in each individual, but it gets harder and harder once you lose that lean body mass to put it back on. So fat stores can be lost and replenished, but lean body mass, not so much. So it is important to be able to make sure you have enough nutrients in your diet so that you don't unnecessarily lose protein and lean body mass, because it will be much harder to gain it back.
Interesting. So when people talk about lean body mass, a lot of times, at least what comes to my mind, is exercise and physical exercise, and not necessarily so much nutrients and food. Right? So I'm not sure. I mean, yes, protein drinks and all that kind of stuff are big nowadays, right?
Yes.
But I wonder how many people really do make that loss of lean body mass connection with protein.
Yeah, we mostly think about it just as muscle, but when we are losing call it, I guess, clinically, protein compartments, and that really includes your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your organ tissue, so your immune system, your enzymes in your body, and then your hormones as well. So it impacts all of the things that we might need. Amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. So it's a much larger category than just muscle mass.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm sure that most people are probably more like me and have never made that or been educated that it's such a much larger issue.
It's not something, that comes top of mind, and because of those changes in our bodies, we definitely, as we age, start to see like poorer wound healing. Our fractures don't heal as well. Of course, especially these days, everybody's talking about how important the immune system is, and that's just a natural decline of our immune function. But proteins make up our antibodies and immune system. So, and of course, white blood cells need to function well, are the main components of that. So those are the some of the things that we see. And skin elasticity, of course, everybody complains about not looking the same, but skin integrity is really important to making sure that you don't have any infections, or you're protected. It's our first protection from the environment. So things like that definitely important to maintain. And there are one other, oh, of course, this is the one thing everybody talks about, exercise, keeping those muscles toned. But
Mm.
of course, our balance, having strong muscles really
Ah,
contributes to balance. And that is important at all ages, but definitely as we age, we don't, because of the impaired healing and
mhm.
possibility of fractures, that it becomes even more critically important.
Mm. Yeah, because I know for a lot of people as they get older, um, I remember so clearly the first time I heard that the notion isn't the right word, the statement that um, a lot of times the bone breaks and then somebody falls. Not necessarily. I know this
Oh,
is especially
interesting.
with osteoporosis and
Hmm.
those sorts of things, but it's not that they fell and that's what made the bone break. It's that the
Hmm.
bone actually cracked or broke and made
Yes.
them fall. So that
Yeah.
would make sense.
Yeah. And just following on from our earlier discussion, our because we have things like gastric acid or stomach
Mm,
acid decreasing, we're
mhm,
not absorbing our nutrients as
mm,
well, and we're not absorbing that calcium, magnesium, as well
mhm.
as the proteins to maintain those healthy bones.
Yeah.
So absolutely, some people, I've definitely heard of cases where people step off a curb and they break their ankle, or
Yeah.
it's the first time they've ever realized they have a problem. So part of our strategy for healthy aging is making sure your diet is very dense in nutrients,
Mm,
uh, even though we want to absorb all those nutrients effectively, but we really need a higher density, hence higher density of protein rich foods as well.
okay. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Our bodies are so complicated.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's amazing. Excuse me.
Truly, truly.
Okay, so tell us more about protein because it sounds like that's a very important part of all of
Yes.
this.
Yeah, so because muscle mass and protein, the muscle mass in our bodies are the most metabolically active as well in our body. So
Hmm.
we definitely need fewer calories. We don't need to calorie load, but
Mhm.
proteins themselves, I think a common misconception is that when you eat a piece of chicken, that the whole chicken is protein. And in fact, only about 60% of a piece of chicken includes protein in the way that we're using it, which is a
Mhm.
functional protein, the amino acid containing portion of a meal, so that we can then
Okay.
reuse it. And for everyone who doesn't know, there are amino acids that we make in our own bodies, just like now we've all known about essential fatty
Mm.
acids. Well,
Uh-huh.
they're essential amino acids that we can get
Okay.
only from foods. So some we make and some we can only get from foods. And so going back to the chicken example, every your target day amount of protein
Mhm.
should include looking up the amount of protein in the food that you eat.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Uh-huh.
30 grams of chicken does not equate 30 grams of protein.
Yeah.
And so there are many, many foods, plant-based as well. When you
Mhm.
create a combination of foods, one that comes to mind is the beans and rice.
Mm.
Then having them together, it turns out peas and rice as well form a
Ah.
complete amino acid profile and a
Huh.
complete protein. So you don't always have to, although more complete proteins exist in animal form, you don't
Mm.
always have to rely on that. And if you combine them together, you can actually have quite a protein rich meal that then your body can absorb and use. And in terms of absorption, it matters also not only what you have on your plate, but how much of that you take in. And proteins need to be acidified to be absorbed by the body. And so anything you
Ah.
can do on your plate to make that more acidic, using lemon juice, I think we talked about before, maybe having a little bit of vinaigrette in a salad with
Uh-huh.
some chicken on it, that will help have that protein partially acidified before it gets into your stomach, which it will further
Uh-huh.
be acidified by your stomach acid.
Okay.
But
And
that will help your absorption.
is fat also a little bit of fat along with it? Does that help as well? Or I'm just thinking culturally,
Hmm.
you look at so many of the of foods that developed in a particular culture, beans and rice in
Hmm.
the Latin culture, the peas and rice in some of the Asian
Hmm.
cultures. And most of them have some kind of a sauce or something that they've put on it
Yes.
that has a little bit of oil,
Hmm.
um, and the acid, like you're talking about. Um, and I'm just wondering if the fat is also, the oil or whatever is also a part of creating those amino acids or not, or maybe that's not, you're not that far into the chemistry of it, but
I think, well, that's a great point. At a holistic level, we
Mhm.
tend to think of having a well balanced meal include the carbs, the oils,
Mm,
the protein. So having some fat and carbs with protein,
mhm.
in general, we think of it as being a more highly absorbable meal. And it doesn't pertain specifically off the top of my head. I can't think of how that helps directly with the protein, but there are definitely fat soluble vitamins
Okay,
that you then extract by having all of those components
got
in the
it.
meal.
Okay,
So,
okay. Well, that makes
yeah. So
sense. Yeah.
even though we're talking specifically about protein, it's
Mhm.
definitely helps to have all of those other components of the meal.
Mhm. No, it makes sense. That makes sense.
And it will definitely help you stay full
Ah.
for longer and make things more appetizing. In Romanian culture, we end up talking about. I learned as a kid that if you have too much fat in a meal or not enough starch, you need to balance it out because then it will be hard on your digestion. And so you do
Ah.
learn a little bit of that meal balancing so that it's not
Uh-huh.
too hard to on your stomach.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, because sometimes you can eat certain things and then they just sit there.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Not very conducive to then having a great few hours after the meal.
No, that's true. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
all of that being said, um, what other things around protein in your body taking them in, and do we um, is it like some things where excuse me, if you give it more than it needs at that point, does it store it, does it send it out through your digestion, and what does it do?
I think definitely the the stores are in your in these compartments, so we
Mm,
do store it, just like we can lose it. But I would say that brings up also a good point about excretion. And this discussion, your kidneys, if for someone
mm,
who has kidney
right.
problems,
Hmm.
that is something that can, having a high protein diet may not be indicated because that can stress the kidneys.
Yeah.
But in general, around it, you having these compartments, especially protecting them from loss,
Mm,
is very important. And so, in light of that, someone as we age, the recommendation, daily recommended intake is zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram
oh,
for
okay.
um, like a middle-aged adult and younger. And then as we age, it can exceed the recommended amount is 1.1 gram per kilogram or higher to maintain that muscle mass. And
Oh,
so, again, very personal and depending on what you're doing. And some people are running marathons, and other people are not so much doing some gentle walking. So that will impact it as well. Activity impacts it.
uh-huh.
But so, for example, when you're looking at that for a meal, some meals, if you have a piece of chicken and some rice and beans, you can do about 20-25 grams of protein. But that means you still have, excuse me, 149-pound person with converting that into kilograms might need about 67 grams of protein a day.
Ah, okay.
And then out of that, one meal could be about 20-25 grams. You still have a few grams to go. But there are many different sources like pea protein powders and many things on the market these days. If you tolerate dairy, whey protein can be really good too. But so there are lots of options. And like I said, these days it's really easy to search for, complementary protein sources or, combination foods and get a list.
Yeah.
And as we said before, chewing is also very important when it comes to protein, since it tends to be, especially the animal protein, denser. And we do want to have that mechanical breaking down around as much of that as the acidification helps. Also, you need to mechanically break it down.
And so what about, which we were talking about a little bit before, but what about exercise? I mean, how does that come into the whole picture? I mean, if you exercise more, does that mean you need more protein? Does it mean less? Or what's the, as you get older?
Definitely. As you exercise, building, when you exercise and you build a muscle, you're definitely requiring the body to use more of those amino acids to build that muscle. So it does increase your need and intake. Yeah. So again, maybe that 1 gram per kilogram, if you're doing some intensive exercise, it's good to get a professional opinion to just see, is this too much for me? And one thing is you can get measured, you can get your body mass measured and see how much, what the compartments are, how much fat and water and protein, about lean body mass you have, and then work with someone to see if your activity level really is matching what your intake needs to be.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And I would assume that would change as well as depending on the level of exercise. I mean, the kind of exercise. If you're just out doing fast walking, you probably don't need as much as somebody who's running marathons or something.
Right. And weight training. Every time we do lifting weights, does, quote unquote, injure the muscles or, require
little
some
tears or something.
Little tears to build it up. And so funny that we're both
I know.
But those tears then require for us to replenish. And so then you would need that extra protein for repair. And one thing I also want to add is our risk of becoming vitamin C deficient increases as we age, and vitamin C really helps us absorb and iron. So that's another thing that if you're eating those vitamin C rich foods, and some people need supplements, if it's indicated, but that's something to pay attention to as well, that helps with the utilization and absorption.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I'm sorry. My brain is going off onto vitamin C and sometimes as you get older, particularly women, vitamin C can start bothering your kidneys and your bladder. So you end up with that kind of a catch-22 around. I mean, I took too much vitamin C for a long time, and now I can't take it at all. So, but I try and get it, from my food and stuff. But it's interesting.
Yeah, and there are definitely some people can tolerate certain
Mm-hmm.
supplements more than others, and then there are different forms
Mm.
of supplements
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
their absorption. If you have a calcium carbonate versus, a different form of
Yes.
calcium might be more absorbable. The same thing with vitamin C. There are different
Mm-hmm.
forms that
Yeah.
are suited
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
some people more than others.
Yes. Yes. Oh no, exactly. And calcium's not really good to just take calcium anyways, because people overload on that
Yeah.
as well. And your body, it needs all the minerals to work
Yes.
together. Just having calcium can actually make your bones get weaker sometimes.
Definitely having
So,
too much, yeah, it's not. And it works in concert with magnesium, and obviously vitamin D impacts your absorption and
yep.
utilization of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and balance is key. And then of course
Uh-huh.
working through what your unique needs are based on your health
Yeah.
history
Right.
is important.
Yeah. 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 And I'm excuse me, I'm sure that probably all impacts how your body deals with protein and all of the amino acids and all that kind of stuff as well.
Hmm. Yes, it's all interconnected.
Gee, what a surprise. What can I say? Yeah, it is. Yes, and getting older is just so much fun. Especially you run into all these things. It's just, I have learned a lot, let me tell you, out of necessity.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
It's
yeah, that's the yeah. I think that's the important part is to realize that there's no one size fits all.
hmm
You know,
yeah.
and along with that is you need to listen to your body.
Yes, that is definitely something that is challenging, especially if for people that are used to overworking, or
Mm,
just in modern world in general. We are very a lot on our computers and our phones, and we're not as I think tuned into our bodies as we could be, and
yep.
to the signals. So that is critically important. And I'm always uh, surprised at how nutrients and just therapies work
Mm,
in one person at a certain level really well, and then another person might need many more times, or much
yeah.
fewer
Yeah.
at the same dose, and to have efficacy. So yeah, it's very individualized. That's why I like the individualized approach, because I've clinically seen it bear out. But it does take more effort and work on both parties' part to kind of see what's going on, and how things are responding,
Mm-hmm. Oh no,
and checking in
absolutely.
with yourself. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it can just be because things are are mixing with something else, whereas one or the other by itself you'd probably be okay with.
Hmm.
But sometimes you eat something and you had it with something else, and the two together have made a third
Yes.
um, ingredient or vitamin or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. And on that also makes me think of intolerances, and some people do
Mhm.
have vitamin C is one example where it can be made from a corn base, like they
Mm.
use a certain um, substrate, as they call it, to produce these vitamins. And so for people that are really sensitive to something, then when they use that a starting product to make that vitamin, they cannot react as well to that vitamin, or it causes an aggravation. So that's also something to take into consideration when you're recommending supplements
Yeah,
and things
yeah.
like vitamin C for people.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, I mean, I know there's the powdered as well. that you can take, because to some people, the fillers they
Yes,
react to.
exactly.
And they think they're allergic or intolerant to vitamin C, and it's got nothing to do with the vitamin C.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same thing with protein. Some people do really well. In general, animal proteins are much easier to absorb. They do come, for example, red meat does have the type of protein readily absorbed by our cells, our hemoglobin. It's much easier to utilize that in the body to use it. But some people do really well just on plant-based. And so that's another thing where you need to know your body and kind of work on what works for you, experiment, and also, you know, and making sure that you're not becoming deficient in any particular vitamins. And B12 is one that is commonly a problem as we age. But in general, you don't always have to have animal protein to have the adequate amount of protein in your diet. And as we were talking about, iron is one of those things. You don't want to have too much of it, but you don't want to become deficient, which is a greater risk as we age. And pea protein is high in iron as a plant source.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
interesting.
if you're making a smoothie in the morning, it's something easy. You can add protein to your smoothie that many people can tolerate.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that in, can't remember what it was. I was just looking at something that had pea protein in it. Unfortunately, I don't think I do well with peas.
Oh.
I think it's probably why I don't like them.
Got it. Well, there you go.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of times it's people don't like a particular food because actually it's because it bothers them, or because they don't even realize it.
Yes.
You know, or allergic to it. And peas are one of those things. Oh boy. You know, I like snap peas.
Snap peas.
Yeah, but I can't. Oh, yeah, no. Because my father's favorite food was peas. And God. My mother used to serve them all the time. It's like, no, I'm not eating those. Okay. Anyways, bring up those old memories. Yes, and the other thing too is that some people can also have reactions to some of the protein, particularly the ones that are from animal, and particularly from beef, because of all the arginine in it. The arginine can, if you're sensitive enough, it can, if you have a propensity for like cold sores and things like that.
Yes.
It can cause those to flare up. Herpes,
herpes
or whatever. Yeah.
Herpes virus definitely thrives on arginine. So that's something, if you're really sensitive, it's unfortunately nuts, which can be a good source of protein for as one of our components for some people that are really sensitive. They're high in arginine content. And so you can then have a diet that's very high in arginine and very low in lysine. And it's the lysine that actually helps counterbalance the arginine, so that you don't have herpes outbreaks.
Interesting.
Yeah, that can be a tricky one.
Yeah.
if you have both of those things going on, a love of nuts and then a herpes simplex that wants to keep feeding on it. So.
Interesting. I had no idea they were in nuts. I knew they were in, meat, and because it's always listed, right? It always has it in there. Very interesting. Okay. Well, is there anything else you would like to tell us about protein, or leave us with a particular things to think about and look at? I know you've mentioned quite a few of them as we've gone through, but something, in particular you want to just kind of, hey, start with this, and you can worry about some of the other things a little bit after, if you get this really in place, or maybe that's not possible.
Well, I would say start just thinking about remembering it's important to protect your lean
Mm,
muscle mass as you get older,
mhm,
and just start thinking about proteins that appeal to you that you can
mm,
incorporate into
okay.
your snacks or your meals.
Uh-huh.
And remember their combination foods, like we're talking about the rice and beans. I had a quick list here just to um, where let me just go through. Okay, here we go. Things like quinoa, buckwheat, um,
Mm,
even peanut butter. I know
mhm,
peanut butter on an apple can be a great snack. Barley and lentil soup, things like that are really
ooh,
great. So
I like that.
making, yeah, think of choices that might be just delicious to you.
Uh-huh.
And then remember that it's important to figure out your own requirements and
Mm,
just work on incorporating these things slowly if it's not something you're used to. But remember, it's not the amount of protein in a food is not the whole food. And so it's important to check that. And
mm,
there are many ways, many great resources online to check the protein content of a food. I like to use nutritiondata.self.com, and I can
okay.
give you that link.
Yeah, why don't you send that to me and I'll put it
Yeah,
in the show notes. That'd be
yeah, and
great.
but they're great indexes and resources that just tell you, for example, how much protein is an
Mhm.
egg, and then you can build
Okay.
your diet on that. But I would say keep it simple, incorporate a little bit at a time until you get
Uh-huh.
used to it and see how much you can build and how
Okay.
great,
Okay.
hopefully good you'll
Yeah.
feel.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I would the only thing I would add is to take a look at what you're eating currently,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And then figure out how much more you need or not need, as the case may be. You know, everyone's into
Exactly.
those little protein smoothies and all that kind of stuff. People may be getting more protein than they even think they're getting.
Right. And again, just to stress that if you have kidney issues or there are other health issues that are underlying that, or food sensitivities to certain issues that might be aggravating other conditions, then definitely it's good to figure that out and not load up
Mhm.
on those things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, for sure, for sure. So, okay, well, let's. I think we will do our usual. Um, that I am certainly not a doctor. Chris is, but this is not a place where you do medical advice. So, and if you are having an issue, please talk to your own doctor or go to the emergency room, whatever is most appropriate. And other than that, don't forget that if you missed it, we had an earlier podcast that will have been on um, not same day, not same week as this one, but previously. Be sure and check that out. And otherwise, I will be talking to everybody next week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, Chris, for being here.
My pleasure.